Hi and welcome to this quick video tutorial on the PK grant monitoring spreadsheet. The first thing I'm going to mention is that I think it's a really good idea not to rename the spreadsheet in Windows File Explorer. If you need to rename it, I advise you to double click on the file to open it in Excel and use File Save As from within Excel. And the reason we do that is because there's links from different kinds of tables to pivot tables and the like. Sometimes Excel gets confused and starts to link to an old file with the old name if it's been renamed outside of Excel. We're going to quickly have a look at the spreadsheet. I'm not going to go into the details because some of that's already documented here in the introduction. So we've got the grant tracker table. So this is more about the basics of entering data into Excel as opposed to anything else about grant tracker. So if you're not used to entering data into Microsoft Excel tables, then this will be a quick primer for you. So you can see here we have one row in the table, and when we click on the table, you'll see this table design menu pop up here. When I click outside the table, you'll see that the table design menu's disappeared. So it's just a really quick way of seeing if you are inside a table or not. At the moment, I'm clicking down here on row 6, which is just below the first row in the table, and I want to create a new row in this table. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to type the number 2. Doesn't really need to be in order, but that's the best practice if we can do that. And I'm going to hit enter. And when I hit enter, you'll see that Microsoft Excel has recognized that I've tried to enter some data below the first row in the table. So it thinks that I wanted to create another row in the table, and it's quite right. I did want to do that. So that's the quickest way of entering data in a table. There are other ways. For example, you can right-click and select Insert, and you can insert rows in the table above or below your current entry. Once we've got our row created, so the grant tracking worksheet, the one we're looking at now, creates a row for every approved grant that PK has approved or has a signed grant agreement. And then it's just a matter of going through and filling out the details. We've got the round 1, 2, 3, or rolling, or there might be other rounds that come up. And again, we've got a lookup table here in the lookup worksheet where we can alter the names of the rounds if we need to, or add new ones in. These are all dynamically linked to the validation lists that are present here, and these drop-down lists. So if I add a new one under 6, let's call it rolling 3, let's just call it test. You can see, again, I've added a row to the table, and Microsoft Excel's recognized that. And then when I come back in here, you'll be able to see that that new entry is now a valid entry that I can select. We've got the grantee, which you need to enter. Project name, which you need to enter. Implementation, this is their status, so you can select where they're up to. Could be just at the contracted state. We've got the start and plan completion dates. Try to use the proper date format of DD/YY/CC/YY. Grant amount, this is what PK is paying, this is what the grantee's co-investment is, and this is the total amount. Any cells shaded in orange should be avoided because they've got formulas in. There are also a large number of hidden cells and columns in this worksheet, and so I can unhide those and you'll see that they're all here. So basically what these do is they're joining some data together, or they're looking up data in some of the other tables, depending on the situation. So I'm going to just do that to hide them again. So that they're just hidden to get them out the road to try to keep the table simple and neat. But just be aware that there is other data that is being populated or automatically looked up behind the scenes. So we've got the location facility targets here. So this is where the grantee has documented how many provinces, villages or households they're going to target. what sort of facilities, and if known, how many men and women, and how many people they plan to train. We then have product targets. So this is again where they've illustrated how many products of the different kinds that they're going to implement. There's some instructions in the introduction tab about how to add new products, and maybe we'll look at that at the end of the video as well as how to do that. Going across, so basically that amount of information is all you need to enter when a new grant has been approved in PK, and then the following columns in this worksheet are really about tracking that grant. So every time a milestone's paid, we enter in the milestone payment amount. At the moment it's in Kina. If that's incorrect, we can modify it. We've got the monthly grant reporting tracking here. So this is the grantees, whether they're submitting their monthly reports on time or not. And again, there are instructions in the introduction tab about how to navigate this section. But in brief, we're now up to the month of September. So what would normally happen is that we're now in September, so we'd go back to August and put an N in every row in the previous month at the start of September. And then as the grantees start to send in their reports, we can then tick them off and say, yes, this one's sent in their report, and yes, this one has as well. And then the same thing, the start of October, we would enter N into both of those two rows. It's kind of just like a way of saying we're waiting for the reports to arrive. Doesn't mean they're really late at this stage. It's just a way of setting it up for reporting so we can then update them as they come in, assuming they do come in. And then at the end, we've got, again, tracking of the completion. So whether completion reports have been submitted and the date. And there's a flag here to note whether they've been late in their submission. There is a need to enter in a date here for this function to work properly. But once it's entered, it'll update and flag. There's also a notes column here, and this is really useful to either noting missing data or explaining why you entered certain data in a certain way, or just anything you think that's needed to explain the entry. We're going to quickly look at the grant reporting worksheet. And so once the data's been entered into the grant tracker, we can actually come in here and update these reports. There's not going to be a lot of data to see because we've only got a couple rows entered, and those rows aren't very substantial, but it's really just about making you aware that many of the tables, reporting tables, they're called pivot tables, and they have filters attached to them. So with the filters, you can go in and select, for example here, which round we're interested in looking at the data for. So we can turn them off and then just select round 2, for example, and it'll only show us the data for round 2. I think ABC, this is still pointing to the last version of the table that I created. So I'm just going to quickly pause and sort this out. Okay, so just had to basically refresh this pivot table again, and the second time I've refreshed it, it's actually recognised that the other tables changed. It's not something that commonly happens. Usually it's quite reliable. So now we can see in this drop-down list, we actually only have round 1 available in the list of options. And so that's now only showing data from round 1. So if there are other rounds present, they wouldn't be showing up in this list. And then generally speaking, we'd probably always set it back to all, where there's more than one entry. Perhaps it's worth just going in and we'll change this one to round 2. And maybe we'll put a little bit of data in specifically for, let's just do households and beneficiaries and trainees and a couple products. And that'll be enough to at least refresh the table and see that there is some data for round 2 as well. We can now come back, turn off round 2, and it'll just show us round 1. And again, to select them all, we just click on all. It's always a good idea to reset things back to all, otherwise sometimes you forget that what you're looking at is not the full set of data. So that's just a good practice. You can actually, yeah, that's probably all I need to talk about there. So the two key things were that you can apply filters and to update the pivot tables to reflect the data that's been entered into the grant tracker worksheet. It's just a right click and select refresh. And we might be able to make a nice button to automate that later. And then once we've updated this one pivot table, because all the other tables in this worksheet have been copied from that one pivot table, these also automatically update. So there's no need to right click and refresh every table. Moving on to monthly data. Again, we've got 2 test rows in this table. To add the next row, we just type a number below it and hit enter, and Excel automatically adds that row. We can go to the table design menu up the top, and we can click on the resize table option here, and Excel then shows us how much of the actual data in front of us is part of that table. And you can see here it's actually captured everything already. If for some reason you'd actually entered row 4 here and started typing some data, but it didn't look like it's part of the table, in other words, the color hadn't changed and the border outline hadn't changed to kind of make it look like it's part of a table, you can use this resize table function to actually, change the size of the table manually if you need to include data that you've entered that's not part of the table. So you could just make it go down to the next row, row 8, and there it is. So even though we don't have a number typed in, Excel has now recognized that this row is part of its table. So we can again just continue entering data in this row as well. We do have a large number of columns hidden here, which I will just temporarily unhide. Again, what we're doing is we're breaking down the date entered into month, year, the month number, and then a combined year, month column as well. We've also got grantee, project, and round here, and these are looked up based on the data that's entered into the grant tracker table. So there's no need to double enter this data. Again, it's all hidden in Orange, it's all protected, and you won't even see it. But what it means is that this data in these columns will be available for reporting when we get to that stage. If I go to the right a little bit, you'll also see there is a need to enter the village, but once you've entered in a village, for example, at the moment in the village lookup table, we've only got 2 villages, A and B. So in the monthly reporting, once we do enter village A, it automatically looks up the ward, the local government area, the district and the province for us, given that you've already pre-entered some of that information into the lookup table based on what the grantee shared with you. Again, to enter another row into the village lookup table, it's just a matter of typing in the row below the existing one. So ABC, ward is DEF, and the LLG is a drop-down list referring to the data on the right. And so this can then join to here, and then from here we can then look up the rest of this data as needed. So the PK monthly data worksheet, as per the instructions, we're entering a new row into this table every time a grantee sends in one of its reports. However, because what we're trying to do here, I'm just going to do a bit of undoing just to go back and hide those extra columns. For each time a grantee reports that it's progressed some kind of installation at a village, we actually create a new row in this table. So you might find that you have 2 rows with the same date, the same grantee, but with a different village. And you'd go through and update the facilities section here. So this is how many households or facilities where the installations have occurred in. You've then got the number of beneficiaries, so update that accordingly. Number of people trained, and number of people with disability, and then this number of products, and then any lessons learnt and any notes. Again, the notes could be really useful to say things like, you know, unsure on number of men and women entered, was not in the report. So in this case, if we weren't sure about the number of men and women, female and male beneficiaries, maybe they didn't split it by men and women, we could just put them all in the male column for now, or make it 5 male, 5 female. And we could just highlight those 2 columns and just highlight the cells yellow, just so we know that that's something we need to follow up on. So following up with grantee, you could even make a new column with a flag set to yes or no if we need to follow up with the grantee or not. So that's something we could look at doing. So that's the basics of entering data there. And then again, we're back to the monthly report worksheet. And this monthly report worksheet is looking at data in the monthly data worksheet. To update these tables, these reporting tables, all we need to do is click inside, right click and click refresh. So the same process as before. There are a large number of reports which I won't go through. Again, we're going to see which ones are useful and not before creating a nice little index. The grant report worksheet does have an index at the top, and so it basically creates clickable links to the different grants, to the different reports, just to make it easier for you to navigate. We'll be able to